Grace to you and peace from God our Creator and Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. There have been various books and movies about the Armageddon. One, of course, was the Left Behind series, which went on for a number of books. For those of you who are older, the late great Planet Earth was popular for a time. A number of others through the years. The speculation about the end of time is widespread not only within those of the faith, but also in the general community. Some of you are old enough to remember Mad Max and remaking of that series about some post-apocalyptic age. All the movies that have been made in recent years about zombie apocalypse, Legend and 28 Days, and those movies that want to imagine some terrible outcome for the world. They even have zombie walks. I guess in Salisbury, I think the one in China Grove got rained out this year. But this idea of some imagining of a terrible, terrible time when people are being slaughtered and suffering. Lots of video games take the same approach. Some end-time great war where people are slaughtered and the champions are these guys in huge pieces of armor with big guns and women skimpily dressed, carrying guns and swords. I mean, never quite made sense to me when this guy's got this monster uniform and the woman beside him is wearing a bikini. It just doesn't seem as far as any storyline. But this imagining and wondering about what the end will be like is widespread. And the thing is, it's not new. Jesus sits beside the temple and talks about it being torn down, crumbling. The disciples want to know when. Jesus gives all these signs. Well, the thing is, apocalypse, we tend to think that apocalypse means a prediction about the end of the world, whether in Daniel or Revelation. But that's not what an apocalypse is. An apocalypse in literature is a kind of literature that's meant to offer encouragement and hope to people living in difficult times. Not the object when it's going to happen or to threaten people or make them afraid. It's intended to help people get through hard times. Jesus knew his disciples were going to face hard times. Daniel was writing in hard times. Revelation by John was written in hard times when people were suffering. Earthquakes, wars, they've always been a part of life. They were part of life in Old Testament times. Israel constantly was at war with or threatened by neighbors. In Jesus' day, they were occupied by Romans. There were tragedies. Jesus talks about one, a collapse of a large scaffold in which many people were injured and hurt and killed. We don't know if that was from an earthquake or if it was from poor construction, but it nevertheless occurred. These things always happen. The disciples, when they looked at the temple, couldn't comprehend that it would come down. The temple was the size of 6 football fields. That's how large it was. Those columns were probably on the order of 75 to 90 feet tall and huge in diameter. They could not imagine that that would fall. And yet it did. It was crumbled. The only thing left is that one wall. And that one wall gives you an idea of how massive the structure was. But they couldn't imagine that would crumble. Civilizations come and go. Great buildings come and go. In this country, we have a habit of tearing down buildings and then replacing them with another building. You go through Europe and other parts of the world, they tend not to just destroy something that's perfectly good, but to maintain it and keep it through the centuries. So we have churches 1,000 years old. But in the scheme of things, 1,000 years, as long as it seems to us, is not so very long. The Bible talks about structures and cities as far as 5,000 years ago. Great cities with temples. Before Israel ever existed. Before Egypt became a great civilization, there were cities that were great. And they crumbled and fell. The temple in Israel was huge. And yet, when the Romans were completely fed up with Israel and their rebellions, they destroyed that temple and told the people they couldn't come back to Jerusalem. A great temple. The apocalypse is not there to tell us when buildings are going to collapse, when wars are going to happen, when earthquakes and volcanoes will go on. The apocalypse was written because God's concern for his people meant that he wanted them to be at peace insofar as they could be in the face of whatever came. That they would trust God and believe that God would watch over and care for them in the end, ultimately, regardless of the suffering and the difficulties in this age. The promise from Jesus is that we will be gathered together with him at the end of time in resurrected bodies, without pain, without suffering, without tears. But in the meantime, we're told that terrible things will happen. But none of these terrible things tell us when that end will come. Jesus himself said, no one knows the hour or day. And all those who want to speculate that this sign or that sign means it's going to happen this year or next decade or next century are simply blowing smoke. They don't know. They don't know. And the point is that we should not be concerned about when Jesus returns. If he returns today, or tomorrow, or in the lifetimes of our grandchildren, or 1,000 years hence. The promise is the same. The promise is the one Jesus gave his disciples. The promise is one that God gave the children of Israel. Whenever the end comes, I will be there. I will be with you. And those who follow me will be gathered with me, because God's love and mercy is not dependent on us, but dependent on God. And the assurance is that his mercy is sufficient for us, whatever our past. His mercy is sufficient for us. And he will gather all of us to his table, to his kingdom, for all eternity. Whatever suffering may come in this life, we have the promise of the next. The charge to his disciples was to live every day as if that was the last day. To live every day following Jesus' will, striving to serve him striving to bear witness to those who did not know him, striving to be faithful in the face of anxieties and concerns, and those who seek to build fear. Instead, Jesus says, have faith. God will not abandon you. God will gather you to himself on that day of resurrection. Have faith. The apocalypse is not something to fear, to use as a predictor of anything in the future. It's a reminder that God loves us. And God's grace and mercy is sufficient, no matter what comes. And God's love calls us to share that love each day. That's an apocalypse.